This thing on? Oh my god, it works. How's our audio? Hello. Why hello there. It is I, the bald man. I've had to make an entirely new OBS profile for all this sort of setup. So what's up, guys? You know what? My chat's on the wrong side. I'm a left side chat man, not this right side chat man. I gotta get chat where it belongs. There we go. Look very happy. Good. I got coffee. There we go. All right, so chat. I'm the left side chat man. Audio seemed pretty good. Good. Yeah, we have some of our background music for town playing. That's what's going to be looping throughout the throughout this next 2 to 3 hours of nice and relaxing, super chill, super time. How exciting! I know. Hello, everybody. If you haven't seen, we do have in our Discord, the Dark West Discord, which let me add that to my. I've got this rolling set of notes added. I don't think we have. This is our first little tester chill stream. Hey, Galt. I don't think we have the links set up for our Discord. Let's check. Let's check the official channel. Oh, we do. Okay. We have a button, but we don't have a link yet. So we'll have to add. We'll get a bot with links now. Set up bot for roles, links, and commands. The button works. Good. Yeah. So if you click the button, you'll be redirected to the Dark West Community Discord, and there's a subsection there. I can actually think I could just link that in chat, and that'll be super chill. That should send you to the QA section for this live stream. So we'll use that as a as part of where we're pulling questions, but we're also just gonna be answering questions in chat. It's a very like fireside vibe. So in 14 minutes, we get to 6 on the dot. I'll do a little basic explanation of who we are, what we're doing. And then it'll just be like, answering questions from then on. We have some questions from Reddit as well that we'll go through. Questions from the Discord, questions from chat. And it'll be nice and fun. We're prepping for a big storm in the Northeast here. So that's good. I got a bag of High Chews. Not sponsored or affiliate from the company, but that would be an insane off-brand nonsense sponsor for Western occult 1850s to 1870s ARPG. I don't think Haichu existed then, but a man can dream. Man can dream. Who existed? It's true. Tobacco. Yeah. I've got a rolling list on the side for to-do list, and then I'm going to make a second one that we'll share, because a big part of our game is community involvement. So part of that will be, hey Rocky, good ideas. Make a good ideas list. Incorporate tobacco chew. We gotta have some sort of tobacco chew as a consumable. We do have alcohol in game, so M for mature. But chew's not a bad idea, period appropriate. Not sure what the standardized, a lot of the things when working on this game we've had to do is period appropriate research to find certain examples that make sense for that time frame. So I have to do a little bit of deep diving into what tobacco usage there was at the time. I know pipe tobacco was quite common. There was For sure, tobaccerias and general stores had tobacco, cigars, chewing tobacco. Not sure if they had some sort of early Central Western American zins, the equivalent of whatever a zin is from the time period. I wonder if cowboys had zins, they'd be popping them 24/7, right? That would have been for sure a very common thing. Hey, Bonky. Yeah, I can't imagine a world with cowboys where they wouldn't be just mainlining Zin pouches. We're waiting a little bit, little 10-minute wait, and we'll start. Then I'll do a little introduction. Then we'll start to go through some Q&A cigarettes, rolled cigarettes and corn husks. I believe it. Definitely look at like many of our ideas, we reserve the space to explore different mechanics and devices in game, and the idea of having some sort of tobacco imbibement is definitely period appropriate. There is a lot of strange rules in the sort of Peggy 17 space of like what is and isn't allowed for tobacco and alcohol. I believe it can actually affect video game grading, so that'll be something we have to explore also. Interesting stuff, though. We updated our Steam screenshots last night to be more in line with our current production, our updated HUD and whatnot. It's pretty nifty. You'll be able to see more of it as we work towards stuff. Hey, Brandon. Brandon is our community manager, and I believe possibly our current main moderator technically, which will expand that programming. I was looking at the new screenshots for the updated HUD. Very nifty. Our UI UX artist Dan does he's a wild man at making these sort of assets. He's like a wizard. Can I enhance this? Enhancing it on Steam makes it smaller. I think I have to open it as a new image, right? That's not much of an enhance. The bullets are very fun. There's we'll talk more about it as we go on. Hey, Barn. But one of the components we have set up is the ability to reference bullets and potentially change their modality. And we're exploring that space in a few different angles with some of our classes and some of our weapon types. There's a lot we're exploring for potential usage. So the idea that you could reference individual bullets in your ammunition, like the third bullet, then the fifth one. So while you reload, you could maybe min-max or change that sort of thing. It's one of the cool angles we're working towards. Great job, Brandon. I see Brandon has tagged everybody in the Discord. Yeah. He's a good boy. He's the best boy. That is I'm sure I'll love all the questions. Yeah. Any questions you guys post in the Discord, or if you don't want to do the Discord stuff, you could do it in chat. We obviously encourage the Discord. Or if you already did a Reddit post, I'll be looking at all of them and we'll be working through them in no time at all. And I'm sure that'll beg a bunch more questions. I want a paper trail for legal reasons, yeah. Gotta keep it above board. I really didn't get much of a chance to even appreciate in the recent one he did. This is even crazier than I. Enhance. 1 second. Enhance. All right. The level of detail Dan did. Also, I'm calling him Dan because that's the phonetic pronunciation of his name in English. I can't remember where he's from specifically. I'm going to insult him if I say it wrong because I'm quite friendly with him. But it's, I think, phonetically Deyan with there's umlauts and accents in somewhere. Obviously, that's like the English variation of it, but it just ends up being Dan to me. Our team consists of a lot of different members from a lot of different places in the world, so there's a we try our best to get a mainline phonetic pronunciation. When you sell the game for $100 million, I'll teach you to scuba dive. Bonky, I'll teach you to scuba dive in my backyard for free. We'll get a couple Home Depot buckets, dunk our heads in, you know, and have a great time. Just a couple of guys in a backyard in buckets. What more do you need? What more can a boy ask for? Mm-hmm. The level of detail on the filigree and the life potion and the resource potion are really more than I even thought about. What a fancy thing. Dehance. What's the opposite of enhance? Yeah, it's very cool. He's a cool guy. Whatever is on a right click. Re-enhance. Let's see. Right click is, oh yes, it's like a Reaper with a rifle or a shotgun. Diminish? Enhance, diminish? Maybe. Maybe. You might be right. You might be right, Brandon, community manager. You might be correct. That's not even an area we've really even explored heavily, to be honest, John, is the ability icons. These are obviously like pretty vibe appropriate for what we're going for. But we've got so many cool skills and stuff set up that we're gonna have a lot more of these little fun things. You know, as part of the one something I thought about. This is going slightly off topic, but it'll fill 4 minutes until I start doing Q&A stuff. When you launch a video game, right, small, medium, or large, you start to think about like what extracurricular assets you could have as part of like supporter packs or fun things you could do. Some things we have planned that I'm not going to mention because they're like more surprise things. We're not going to talk about that. But an idea I had that I looked up in the US that I didn't really even mention to our team because I found out it was immediately not legal. It's not nefarious, it's just not legal, which was, I wonder if we can have custom US Postal Service stamps that we could make period appropriate with using skill symbology. Like, so, imagine like a stamp you would use for a letter, but like it looked like that, and then selling stamp sheets. But you can't they looked and said it was illegal to make our own stamps because it's a level of US tender, like it's considered currency. So it is unfortunately not legal, but it's not nefarious. That's what I meant by like it's fine to mention it because it's not like a nefarious thing. But it wouldn't have been cool if we could sell stamps. Like that just would have been a cool little flourish of a vibe. Hi Gog, how's it going, buddy? We have Sir Gog in chat. My fellow foundational developmental pillar here. He's on the other side of the stratosphere, and it is, I want to say, 8 or 9 a.m. So early. Shouts out to Sir Gog himself, the Gogger. Big Daddy G. Is that my nicknames are going one way. Ah, 10. All right, nice. Sir Gog from the future. Future Gog inbound. Almost midnight. Oh boy, near left. All good. What's up, Aaron? How's it going, man? 96. That's the opposite of 69. It effectively is the same thing. You're just facing the direction. Yeah, there's a big ice storm traveling up the East Coast in the U.S. Big ice and snowstorm. So by me, I'm estimated now to get almost upwards of 2 feet of snow, which is preposterous sounding. But I got a call from my town like an hour ago, um, where it's like, "Hey, don't leave your house for the next day." It's like, got it. Wasn't planning on it. You know, wasn't even planning on it. Yeah, it might be a global snow thing. Could be. Could be. Could be. Well, I guess we'll just start the this portion of the live stream, the Q&A portion, with just a little breakdown of what we are and what we're doing. So, my name is Matt Lighty. Many of you may know me. I have been playing ARPGs, video games, my entire life. Most people know me from YouTube or stream, in Path of Exile. Um, Sir Gog is in chat. He's on a similar life trajectory in that way. Um, and yeah, we came on this project at various points, working to develop what we feel like is going to be the best iteration of an ARPG we can. You know, we're here to make the best sort of ARPG possible as a goal for us and as a service to the players. And that's called the Dark West. It's an action ARPG, action role playing game. I'll read the little Steam bio, then I'll extrapolate that. It says it challenges both your skill and sanity to face a cursed western frontier where faith and damnation war beneath an eternal dusk. Your choices will carve a path through a world where greed unearthed something fouler than death. So, yeah, I mean, the vibe is it's an occult western ARPG. There's guns, there's some underbelly of evil mysticism going on, and there's this really cool overtone in the game of kind of a social differential between a couple of warring factions that are, two sides of the same coin, if you will. You get the Order and the Damned, and it's your choice as you progress through the game to affiliate yourself with them in various ways. Because a key pillar of our game is world building. So, working through the campaign and the progression of that, also knowing that your decisions have impacts in game and what those impacts and repercussions will be. So we're, at this point, we're in development. We are looking to have an early access sort of thing. We'll say roughly early summer, but a few months out, and we'll be keeping you guys very, very updated as we progress. But the idea is that we're going to be doing these sort of community vibe check, Q&A type things pretty much every couple of weeks. We'll try, whether it's myself or some other team member in our crew who's working on things. And through that, we're going to, just try to use you guys to help build the sort of game that we'd all like to see as fans of the genre and work towards that, Yeah. So we're going to cut to some Q&A questions, but if you have questions, feel free to ask them in chat. We have Brandon, our community manager, is just collecting them, but it's like a very chill time, so we're not under like a massive time constraint here. I'll be here for as long as there's questions, basically, and then we'll ask them to the best of our ability, or answer them. I can ask questions also. I'm allowed to. You can't say I can't. So I'm going to first just pull, I guess, questions from Reddit, because that was kind of a finite pool. We do post on Reddit. It is typically on the Reddit ARPG, but I think we'll probably end up having our own subreddit also. Self Q&A is crazy. I could ask myself questions. What is the dark lesson? Who is Lighty? I feel like I just answered that one. Oh my god, it's bright. Engage, dark reader. Go. Amazing. Hello Fart Blaster. What a great name. Is the game being designed with controller Steam Deck support? Our movement scheme in-game is WASD. I believe that is an angle we can explore. So, as of right now, I can't totally say hardline yes, but any sort of optionality that makes sense within our game scope, we're absolutely open to exploring. That could apply to a lot of things. So that's something that is definitely on our radar, especially since we already have WASDA. It's something that we're considering and thinking about going forward for sure. Wow, someone said I'm the best Path player. So true. So someone did mention that they saw the trailer. The trailer currently is not on our Steam page because we have a massively updated, super sick, fun, cool trailer that'll be coming out sometime in the near future. You know, you'll be seeing that and they'll be like, wow, that's a great trailer. Does this hide the, you could still see them if I do this, right? That's not true, Sean. You could see them. Oh, you can't. I do have them cut off. Wow. That's great. What if I do that? What if I enhance? Does this make it better for you? This is what you want. Even better. Even greater to read. I can't read. I don't speak Portuguese, but there's that. Okay. You know, I'm glad. I have to dehance again. Perfect. Look at that. And look, you've got full question access once more. Little Reddit balloon in the bottom. Top 5 in R RPG at the moment. That makes sense. Yeah. It is one of the subreddits of all time. That guy's excited. Oh, okay. I assume the exclamation parts are excitement. This is the big question, the big good question. We're going to ask this one. This is from Muffin, who's in our community. So, the multi-layered question. If online is a planned feature, how will you guys tackle trade? Will there be an auction house? Will there be a person trading like Path of Exile, complete automated like RuneScape's Grand Exchange? How will the classes... Let's answer one question at a time, because these are like 90 questions at once. So, as of right now, we are planning to launch in an offline single-player experience, but we reserve the optionality going forward to explore the dynamics of multiplayer in the future, in the far future. But right now we feel like launching in a single player offline experience is the best thing to do, and it will yield the best result and the best experience. But the future is a vast land, and we're absolutely not setting ourselves up to be pigeonholed in any way. So this is a bridge we will cross way down the road regarding trade and whatnot. It'll require a large portion of different balance. Something myself and Sir Gog have been setting up is a solid foundation, a set of bones in our game, so strong, like a mighty Skeletor, you know? And with that robust foundation, we'll have, the world is our oyster going forward. How will the classes play a role in your character's overall build possibilities? Will it be a rigid path that you take that dictates which abilities you can and cannot use? Will it be more freeform? So, currently, the way we have it set up is the classes will have somewhat of a toolkit they could use that then you could create builds amongst them. I would say it's like pseudo on rails, so not full modularity, but there's a bunch of different varieties of skills you can have for each class that you could choose to invest more or less into different dynamics of them that'll yield, ideally, a very different build feel. With the different classes may come innate differences in difficulty from first experiencing them. Some classes may require more mechanical input, some less. Some have higher offenses, some defenses, but there should be the optionality to basically build what you want within those classes and choose to invest more or less into the different dynamics. We're making the skills in the classes with certain builds in mind. So when we create the suites of skills for a class and their abilities and their notables and their sub-notables and things like that, we're thinking, would this feel really good? Would this work with that? What would it feel like if I invest more into this, than that? So a dynamic could be like projectile speed or projectile size or more chain, less chain, angle, cast time, more mana investment, more resource, these different things. So when we create a class, it's not haphazardly thrown together. The idea is we're creating it with the intention that all of these pieces to the puzzle can be used with each other in different ways, but also the pieces themselves feel good. A lot of people who play ARPGs, we're kind of like to go one trick pony, and we have it set up that you can do that if you want. If you really fall in love with one or two skills, you can absolutely invest narrow and deep in those things. You hope our current chain plans work? I think they will. We have a really cool foundation for projectiles in general in our game. Our lead programmer, Ricardo, shouts out to Ricardo, somewhere in the world at the moment. He, through him, we've set up this really fun projectile system where we have a very large amount of portions of projectiles we could reference. So, a bullet, when you shoot it, isn't just a bullet. It has mass, it has velocity, the culmination of speed, size, fall off, distance of travel, all of these things you could reference in different ways and different combinations, and it yields a totally different result. Same thing when you expand out to different weapon types, right? Bullets have spin. I don't know. It's a good question. It's not. I don't know if it's a good question, but it's a question, Bonky. I don't know. The bullets definitely have drop. There is a level of diminished efficacy the farther a bullet travels that is also intrinsically tied to the weapon profile. So, but it's mostly like we try to apply a level of like pseudoscience to common understanding of how firearms work, right? Where it's like we know that a bullet from a revolver on average will travel less than a bullet from a rifle, for example. So as we introduce these different sort of weapon profiles in game, and then subcategories of them, because there's we're trying our best to keep it period appropriate to a degree. So if it's roughly Western America, 1850s to 1890s, right? Within that time frame, there's very popular firearms of different categories. And then that's going to yield different results, because what was possible then is also going to be on average less than what is possible now. So well, someone asked a question later, which we'll get to, which was, in that same time frame, you had things like bow and arrows to Gatling guns. It's like, yes, these existed, and we're going to for sure explore. No promises and anything, but we're going to explore all the different things, because it has, as long as it makes sense, it's definitely something we're willing to explore. Yeah, having the bullets only spin. That's just now we're getting into the movie Wanted, where it's like if the bullets have spin, they can only go, in one direction. I actually just saw a YouTube short about Wanted. I think it was either this morning or last night, where it was the James McAvoy's character was shooting the fly wings off with Morgan Freeman. He's like, "You could do it." We should get Morgan Freeman in our game. That'll be great. That might be the end of us, but all right. Third part of this question: when it comes to late game farming, will there be dedicated boss drops? How will we go about farming general loot? Will it be an end game or randomized zone system like mapping? So currently, we are focused on making a really good A to Z first full chapter, full campaign type experience. That's going to be, we'll say, pseudo linear with a bunch of side activities and little things you could do, and incentive to explore and also spend time in town doing various fun side events and whatnot. And then we're definitely going to have some system of what we would describe as a repeatable endgame. What that gets expressed as now, will it be the ultimate endgame come launch past EA? Most likely not. But at no point in time will it be an asset that we spend time creating and then don't utilize in some way down the road. So if we make a system, for example, where there's an endless farm zone, kind of think like Maelstrom of Chaos and PoE, it'll be represented somewhere eventually in that way. But we're definitely going to have something, because we're shooting for a really solid, chunky, 10-hour baseline campaign without I think GOG referred to it as a victory lap mode. Like, try not to do a normal to cruel thing, because I personally dislike that. And it's like, I'd rather us just do something cooler and newer and have it be bigger. So we're trying to do that. Um, and that'll be fun, I think. And then some sort of end game, because it's like we want to set it up so, yeah, you could spend your 10 hours and have a really, really great time as you progress. But also, if you want to sink 1,000 hours into it, it won't feel bad at all. And you'll have definitely things to work towards, whether it's farming bosses or just accumulating loot. The loot in the game, something we're currently in the process of implementing fully, but the idea is that there will be way less loot of a much but of a much higher quality. So trying to return to the golden era of loot feeling impactful and not so much a filter hiding 99% of gear, because to me that's like kind of a bad vibe. What's the point of loot if we're hiding most of it, right? So that's where I would probably end that question. Let me get I'm just gonna have this on screen as I yap, but I'm gonna start looking at the questions from the Discord. Ugh, I got a new coffee cup. It's like a mug that has a ceramic liner. So I had this coffee from 7 hours ago and it's still warm. Crazy stuff. Crazy. All right, let me pull up this, because I'm sure you guys are. Yeah, it looks like we're still getting questions actively, which is perfectly great. I'm gonna go all the way to the top. My God, Bonky, how many questions did you chat GPT? How does a coffee last 7 hours? Well, I'll tell you what happened, Gog. All right. So I woke up, made coffee, and then my wife left for the day and she took the car. And then I found out that she used the last of the milk and didn't tell me. So I wanted milk in my coffee, and I knew that I had this new mug thermos thing. So I sealed it up, and then I just set it there. And then when she came back home, I made sure she grabbed milk on the way home. And then now I have milk in my coffee, and it's still hot. It's crazy. Great stuff overall. Okay. So the first question from Bonky is, when killing monsters, will the bullet wounds leave gaping holes? That may have initially been generated as a meme question, but it actually resonates onto something we are currently in the process of exploring and trying to implement. And it's a very, very cool idea that we're hoping to turn to reality here. And that is the idea of dismemberment. Okay? So the idea that you could shoot an enemy and then knock off portions of their bodies. So not strictly humanoid enemies, also extends to certain parts of animalistic enemies. But that's currently something we have, I think, our rigging guy and our programming team working through. Hopefully we'll have something to show on that, maybe in like a devlog type thing, because that would require also more talking since there's a lot of technical aspects of it. But the idea that, wouldn't it be cool if you shot a dude and then it just, his arm popped off? And then if it did, what would that result in? All right. The idea that, so if a guy loses an arm, is he going to behave the same? No, he would probably change up his attack pattern in some way. If he loses both his arms, what is he going to do? Well, the idea is he's going to run up to you and try to kick you and bite you. If he doesn't lose his arms, but maybe he loses both his legs, well, he's going to crawl towards you, right? If he loses his head, what's going to happen? Well, he's going to wave around like a chicken with his head cut off, right? Basically. So it's like, to us, it's, because the through line of weaponry in our games is firearms, it's like, as part of our mission statement of trying to make the best ARPG we possibly can, right, especially in this setting, it would be a disservice if we didn't explore all these sort of things, So it's like, a lot of times you get games that have these like high scopes but poor implementation, and we're trying to we're on path to do both. We're going to have a high scope and great implementation. It's like, it makes sense that when you have guns, you would have these sort of effects. So that's absolutely something we're looking into. And hopefully we have it in its best iteration, because it yields so many interesting things. So an example of what is born out of dismemberment as an idea, right, is it's not just that you could shoot off somebody's arm, right? It's that when you have it set that that arm is an individual actor in Unreal, right? It can now be referenced as an independent object. So you could do things like pick it up. You could do things like have an enemy grab it and use it as a adjunct club. You can grab a torso and use it to as a meat shield. Like there's just so many. You could maybe consume corpses in such a way. So it's like the ability to reference those things is just it opens up a lot of different flavor avenues. We're like a young Guy Fieri traveling around, right? We're just trying to get to Flavor Town. So anytime we see something like that, it opens up all these new opportunities and ideas, and we definitely try to like explore those cool avenues. But that's also why we are trying to be pretty community facing in doing these sort of live streams, and then working on doing more news posts, hosting more sort of community public events in the Discord, that sort of engagement, especially trying to like aim towards a weekly basis type thing, because we want to hear what you guys think, and we think it's really really cool, right? And it obviously has to fit in the constraints of it can't be high fantasy, it has to be Western occult time period accurate, like sure, but we think we sort of explore these things. We're like, this is super cool, and it's cool to vibe check with the community and be like, do you guys also think this is super cool? And then everyone's just like, hell yeah, we think it's super cool. And it's like, I agree. Anyway, let's keep going. So we get a lot of that. So when we did our basic UI exploratory sort of implement, we were going to add the new UI in, add the new HUD in, right? I think I have it here still. Yeah. So, we made a post on Reddit and we did a little poll and we were like, here's 3 different variations. What do you guys think? And the one we liked, I think, was the one that was majority picked anyway. So it worked out great, but it's just like the odds of, us having that sort of push and pull with the people. All right. Next question from Aaron is how do you achieve build diversity with a gunslinger theme? Other weapon types, magic-like systems, melee brawling, throwing booze bottles. Okay, so a lot of questions in there, but these are great questions. So I kind of addressed the build diversity in general, but it's a good question with the gunslinger. So currently, the gunslinger is our first class of hopefully many. I can't tell you a precise number about how many we're going to have upon early access, but we're working on a few. And the idea is that each class does feel distinct, different, with maybe slight higher or lower levels of approachability from difficulty. So one of the things that we discussed was the idea of like maybe a class is more new player friendly, maybe a class is more mechanically, complicated. So, and you could express yourself in either. Regarding the guns, everybody's got a gun. And guns are the main form of weaponry, so that is being thought of as the through line for combat is gun projectile based. But some classes do tap into that occult undertone more, for sure. So we have one of our second classes who I'm not going to mention much about because it's a bit of a, keep a little spoiler stuff, but they do explore more of the, magic theme. But again, it's going to be tied into one of the faction philosophies in game, one of the thematic vibes in game. So definitely not high fantasy. It's just going to be more kind of that, dark undertone of the occult West, but still utilizing things that are, magical, but not like fairies and gumdrops magic. Like the world in which the Dark West exists is visceral, brutal, Western. I mean, you watch any Western movie, of which there's many. I'm not saying it's explicitly like something like a Tombstone or a Bone Tomahawk, but like none of these movies, even the more pleasant ones, don't exist in a pleasant space, right? Add to that some sort of social inequalities in game. Some sects are more affluent than others, more privileged than others. So that, playing with those dynamics and the factions going forward. A lot of cool stuff. Regarding melee, that's also something that we will obviously explore going forward. But we don't have any current systems for that, but like everything else, never say never. But we're focusing on the gun aspect of it being leading into the Dark West, kind of. So there's ways to portray, you know, a lot of what would be the more brawler kind of bar fighter vibes, but also maybe using things like a sawed-off shotgun or something, something else, right? But keeping like the through line of the gun game. Same thing with, I guess, projectiles as of such. So for throwing booze bottles, throwing piss bottles, that sort of stuff. For sneak peeks, we did update the screenshots on the Steam page. We're currently going kind of sort of a visual revitalization of a lot of our social assets and stuff. So just definitely look out in the Discord, look out on the social medias and the Steams. Because a lot of these screenshots, like we're saying, this is all new stuff that we're showing, and even then the iterations of it will be better as we go along. But there's like a lot of cool things we're exploring. The UI stuff is super sick though. But yeah, that's a great question. Next question was, will there be a magic system? I think I answered that mostly, which is technically yes, but think more occult, not magic. And and again, like even Gog was saying about anyone melee oriented would have had a firearm in the same way that anyone who is using any sort of casting or curse based, occult based magic stuff is going to be doing it with firearm in tow. And will be based on any existing pantheons, or will be something custom made. Yeah, so if you're asking about the history framework of it, we do have our own unique custom made underworld of magical deities and explanations. Everything is explained in game, and I'm not going to tell you how specifically because that's something you'll find out as you play. But from reloading your weapon and how you have, pseudo infinite ammunition to why your character's able to respawn to why things work the way they do in game, there's explanations for all of it in various lore tidbits and stuff. So you're not gonna get a end of Soul Eater through friendship. Everything is worked out, and don't think about it. It's there's tons of things, and it might present itself in a sort of iceberg setting where you might only have the first 5 or 10%, and you'll have to dig for the bottom 90. But there's something written for everything for sure. Great question though. Oh, good. All right. Amazing, Bonky. So we got a bunch of questions coming up that are of the highest quality. Will I be able to live the power fantasy of being Wonder Woman with a primary lasso-themed class? So much like the melee question, we're exploring it, but Wonder Woman specifically, I don't know if the outfit would be super, era appropriate. I don't think Linda Hamilton, the original Wonder Woman, was even alive then, but I'll make some phone calls. We'll have to find out. Indiana Jones, similar situation. There's definitely hats. You could see the gunslinger class here does have a hat. Indiana Jones has a hat. Basically the same thing. Will there be a viable bear trap skill for the first time ever in the genre? Yeah, there's the idea of having trappers or some sort of trap-based thing is for sure something we'll explore as well. It's actively on our radar as a class expression in some way. It's period appropriate, so it makes sense. The idea of weaponizing it is less period appropriate. I'd have to look at like some sort of things to see if there was, poachers were setting traps for other people. I mean, to a degree. But not so much the throw. Like PoE has it, you throw a trap. I don't know. I'm pretty sure any hair trigger, like beaver, muskrat, bear traps, you yeet one of those 40 yards, I think it's gonna pop whether you like it or not. But yeah, any questions you ask, feel free to ask them. Brandon is collecting them, so don't worry. And if for some reason I missed a question, and there's a bunch of them in the Q&A channel. We can do a follow-up post on like Twitter or something. So nothing is going to seep through the cracks here. Don't worry. This is a great question. Will I be able to summon prairie dogs and other common Western animals such as tumbleweeds? So 2 things to that point. One thing is I'm a big advocate of the idea of critters filling an environmental space, kind of like how World of Warcraft does it. The idea that they are a low-level enemy you could kind of just kill, I think is cool. So I think we'll definitely explore that route. The summoning of them, that's where you're probably leaning more towards the fantasy aspect and less away from the game scope, So probably not there as much. But the idea of having prairie dogs, I think, is probably something we'll explore, or small critter-based things. Then you wrote tumbleweeds, which is funny. I can't go into detail about why, but there is a tumbleweed meme in the game. Well, it will be in the game, but there's something tumbleweed related. That's as much as I'm going to give you for now. Will the game have a collection log or any other long-term goals for people to complete besides min-maxing a character? Yes. Okay, so there will be... So for the card system, you can see the framework of it in the screenshot here. We have a card system broken up into 2 sections, which I talked about more in depth than in the last video devlog we did. But the idea is that there is your standard deck of 52 cards, and then a set of kind of unique tarot cards. These both operate in a hand setting, which is the 5 slots in your inventory, in your character sheet. These are adding to your character power in a variety of ways. Them themselves have stats, but then there's a system where if you assemble them into, pseudo-realistic poker hands, they can give you different benefits and bonuses. The actual values of them are up for currently adjustment as Mr. Surgog and I work through the numbers on overall things, and that'll be more detailed as we go more towards early access. But long story, mega long. The idea is that you have your cards set to your build, and they augment your build in a variety of ways, making it better in however way. Something about the tarot cards can be more akin to like a large notable or a keystone, maybe massively changing the way that a build plays and that sort of thing, right? But ideas, they're a big part of character power. So they're also going to look really fucking cool. So we're working on the art for the tarot cards, and the cards themselves will be really, really sick. And there's going to be a lot of different variations to how they are propagated. Some of these variations will actually benefit to stats. Some of them will be more just visual discrepancies. Think like fractal occurrences on something akin to like a CSGO knife, where you have like different float patterns or whatnot. So it won't affect the actual cards themselves stat-wise, but there might be some minor variations to different things. A torn edge here, a rip there, whatever. Maybe cards will spawn gilded as of such, So with all that being said, there will be a storage system in town to some degree. With that storage system, I'm going to ensure that we have some sort of collection, a pseudo binder, if you will, so you could collect and showcase these kind of cards to yourself and work towards finding specific ones for builds. Maybe use one that's like really, really cool you want to re-roll into something and make a new character and utilize it, right? So it's like the idea that there's going to be a storage and collection system for that will, I think, absolutely be the case. Mm-hmm. Oh boy, what a great question. Will I be able to play as a sentient saguaro cactus that deals primarily reflect and thorns damage to attackers? When I say there are no bad questions, I mean it, because obviously that's a great question. No, we will not be able to play. I'll just normally, I'm very stringent at normally not saying yes or no, but I'll say no we won't be playing as a sentient saguaro cactus. However, the idea that there will be some sort of system for reflect in thorns, it's something I've explored and that I think we will explore, but it's a portion of game development that is actually very tricky to implement well. So thorns and reflect is strange. Reflect is a percent normally the way that these are described are in 2 different buckets. Reflect is taking a percentage of damage you're receiving, reflecting it back. Thorns is normally a flat amount of damage that's being dealt upon receiving damage. The problem with the first part, Reflect, is if you have ways to mitigate your own damage, and you can get Reflect values quite high, you can use it to obfuscate content by, like, eating a boss attack that'll then one-shot a boss itself, if you can get the values high enough. Thorns typically is less of a problem. Normally it's resolved upon receiving a hit, so the damage is still done in such a way. I think the idea of having a thorn-based thing could exist in such a way that wearing bolted chaps was not uncommon, or having spurs be not uncommon in Western America set in that period. So the idea that somebody tried to harm you, and that as a byproduct of that, they took an amount, like a small amount of flat damage, or maybe had a status effect or a debuff or something like that. I think that is definitely one of them. Surgog is involved in the project. We have a few PoE people that are working through our QA portion of it. So that's like quality assurance, so testing things and giving some feedbacks. And there's a couple people also like tangentially involved in the project. Surgog, we brought on initially to help us work the foundation of the damage numbers. Me and him are the main two PoE people, I would say, that are working like pretty much full time on this. And one of the things is we have, like, not to speak for him because in chat, but we have such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this game space, and we're really quite good at translating that information into foundational systems and then building it out, that, he's 60% full-time. I'm 200% full-time, but he's 60% full-time. But yeah, so it's just like, it's one of those things where we part-time, full-time, exactly. Somebody who's just such a wealth of knowledge that it's my job. I refer to myself as like the Rick Rubin of the company, because I want to surround myself when it comes to a project with the best people possible. And when I think of somebody who has a lot of experience in this game space, we needed somebody to help with foundational setup. I thought, who is the best person that I could think of? And Surgog was that person. So it's like, to me, it was like a no-brainer. So, we've been developing all these systems, and basically making everything from the ground up. And he's just come on pretty recently, but he's our think tank number man for a lot of stuff. So we're very happy to have him. And then as we progress and enter more of a testing phase, we'll bring on more people. We have a couple people that are definitely part of our weekly QA team. So in like the PoE2 space, it's people like Major Aimless and Blazeworks are two guys that we've been working with that are just have like a really cool, like good, like newer, good head on their shoulders, right? So it's good to get like some people of different varieties of investment and play. I don't necessarily want to name everybody because I don't know how much of them want to be named per se, but I know those two guys don't mind the publicity in that way. But we do have a lot of people that are involved at like a surface level. But I'm probably the person that's most known for in the path space on the deepest level, and now we've got GOG as my my anchor, my number anchor. So through us, we could, I have the utmost confidence that between myself and GOG working on a game from the ground up, we're going to catch every major pitfall. And a lot of that's like learning about, learning from every, not necessarily mistake that other games have made, but decisions that have led them down a irreversible road. Like something like a Path of Exile is just too deep to reverse some systems. Like a lot of games would beg for a blank slate, like they would beg to start from scratch in a lot of things. So we're like identifying all those things, right? And then be like, no. Yeah, so like Scour is one of those things where like, no, it's, or whatever. It just, there's a lot of examples of it. Or even just one of the things that GOG referenced was the fact that they were using 32-bit integer versus 64. and then that had repercussions in itself. Or being so reliant on a filter system to where your game is hiding 99% of all loot. Like, you can't tell me that's objectively not something they would, if they could reverse it, they would. But it's like it's just way too pigeonholed, right? So there's a lot of things like that that are just like not so much mistakes, but they're lessons that we've learned and we know, so we could just make it better from scratch, do it harder, better, faster, stronger, you know? And then the same way that 10 years from now, when we're super successful and, you know, on Gaben's yacht, as the meme continues, some new game will look back at us and be like, I can't believe they did that and whatever. But that's life. Which actually leads into the next question. The next question was, what lessons are you learning from other successful ARPGs in the market? I feel like I just answered that pretty much, but basically we're identifying the main thing is, so the main lesson we're learning, I would say, is take any ARPG you've ever played and try to boil it down and encapsulate the best of each of those experiences, not so much in a system or a function, but just in an experience. So then putting that into a pill and then, you know, swallowing it. So it's like when you kill like a Hillock and he drops a unique, that feels really good. And then now you get like 10 to 15 levels of like burst power. And that doesn't happen often, right? That's like a rare thing. But we've identified that as like an example of an opportunity that might happen some of the time, right? Those sort of things where we want it to be like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened. That was a great league. You know, when I dropped Wanderlust off of Hillock, I had my first 2 hours of League was the best I've ever had. So how do we take that, boil it down, and then make sure that you know, that's a 1 in 500 occurrence? Then that same thing for every single moment in a game. The same way that the first way you, like, you know, you're playing Diablo 2 for the first time, and you hear that music in town, or you see that, you know, that NPC get killed, like those first visceral punches to every sort of one of your senses. Bottling it and then, you know, not replicating it, but trying to, you know, pay respects to that sort of idea. So that's you know, that can only be born out of having a gross amount of playtime in all these games. But it's the same thing where it's like, it felt great when this happened, or, you know, saying it didn't feel great when that didn't happen. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Another part of the question is pretty good, which is, what challenges has the Western theme presented in this genre? It's a great question. The game is set in Western cowboy times America, roughly 1850s-ish. So, is that a challenge? It can be. We don't feel like we're shackled, that's for sure. It just means we have to operate within the rules, but the rules aren't a bad thing, you know? It's like, we know that we can't have mechas flying around. Is it a bad thing? No. It's like, we can encapsulate a lot of the feelings of most everything we want to represent in the confines of the genre. And again, we have occult undertones, so we could kind of, you know, hedge the bets. I think GOG referred to it as like the rule of cool when it comes to like DMing and D&D, which is, you know, if we feel like something's super, 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 super cool, we're gonna try to get it in, right? We're gonna try to like make it so it makes sense. So the idea of having projectiles chain. Can a projectile chain in real life? Well, yeah, probably once, maybe not 2 or 3 times and have it accurate, but it's like, it's personifying the vibe of what we're trying to do. You know, it's like, it has to work to a degree, but you know, it has to make sense. As long as it makes sense and it's somewhat respectful, it should be fine. Wild West Giant Steampunk Spiders. You mean Dr. Loveless? I love Dr. Loveless. We have a system in our game. I'm not going to go in depth about the mechanics of it, but the idea is that there is a wanted board in some way. Pretty much anything you could think of that would be in the West and that would make sense, we're probably going to have in some way. There's like a wanted board. Part of that is, you know, generating wanted posters, which is really fun. So with that list, that's a really fun space for us to express and pay homage, pay homage to a lot of fun characters in Western movies, culture, whatever, right? So a lot of those things are, you can have, one of those bounty things, say like Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, or Wyatt Earp, or like whatever references. So we're gonna have very, very cool ways like that, right? So one of them is like, one of the ones I initially thought of when we were making the list was General Bloodbath McGrath, who was the guy in the Wild West movie who had a big ear horn full of wax. I think he was a Confederate general, so not a great guy. But he was when they first had like that aquatic tank thing roll on the battlefield and then just like schmurdered everybody. He was the general who died. Bloodbath McGrath. Yeah, I see the next question is about the steampunk elements. Right now we have no steampunk elements, and I don't think we're going that direction, but not to say there couldn't be something that would be on the cusp in such a way. I could really maybe see it being more something like a device in a town, like a brewing mechanic, be more steampunky. But I don't think you're gonna see like guys with top hats with like gears on them. We would shy away from that. Yeah, great word for a Kickstarter backer, a wanted poster. It's a great one. I'm gonna write that down. Write that down. Good job, Gog. We actually had that on a list of a list of things. I'm gonna write it down faster than Brandon can. He can't stop me. Oh, you did it. I'm too fast. My notes are better than Brandon's notes. All right. Will I be able to play the sheriff class, if elected, of course, and select my deputies, and eventually become a marshal if I attain a high enough level? So that's a funny question. So in my mind, I see a sheriff class. This is going to be a leap, and I hope that, I'm not sure if Kevin, our game director, is listening, but he loves League of Legends. If he ever becomes, types in chat, make sure you let him know how much you love League of Legends when you say the sheriff evolving from a deputy to a marshal, in my mind I was thinking of Kazakhs evolving, in different ways. Yeah, the idea of there being a sheriff class that somehow exemplifies becoming higher ranks, I could see that, being a thing. It's definitely something we could explore in that way. There is for sure a legal system. Like there's, there is a it is not it is the West, but there is rule of law to a degree. So maybe those characters will be represented in some way. Maybe you'll become a deputy, just like you've always wanted. We have a bunch of questions. All right. How much do you plan to draw from the actual history of the period? It's a great question. If any of these questions get answered multiple times, sorry, not sorry. It's okay, because I'm sure I'll answer them slightly different, but, it's all fine. No worries. So we plan to draw from actual history by very simply doing research on that time period and then seeing if there's something fun we can extract out of it from a player experience. So an example of that may be the types of flora or fauna or wildlife you engage with. You're not going to see something that's not from that area as of such, right? You're going to see things that are roughly period appropriate, and then taking them a step further, taking them into maybe more of the occult, more of the corrupted from the landscape. Same way you see in this photo that it is arid desert, patched and flatlands, but they're these corrupted tendrils kind of. And then, what might that be? Maybe they are the same roots from the trees, but just engorged in such a way. So it's amplifying things that we took from the period that are appropriate and then using them as of such. Do you plan on making references or having any actual historical fictional characters of the Old West in your games, such as Billy the Kid? We do definitely have references to things. We will have references. References are a fun way of paying. What was the word? Homage, paying homage to to all these really fun characters. So something like a Billy the Kid is a great example. It is, yeah. No, GOG is actually wrong. The game takes place exactly in 1882 Mesa, Arizona. It's a Tuesday and it's 4 p.m. That is where the game. No, it is just a of the era, of the region, of the period, personifying the Wild West times. He mentioned same going for historical events such as the California Gold Rush. Absolutely, the Gold Rush is mentioned. Gold is definitely something that is on our mind thematically, but also there's literally a tarot card that I already showcased in the last devlog that is called Gold Rush. So there is going to even be, references to things. That's a great way to showcase fun flourish, right? Is in flavor text, is in quest dialogue, is in scribbled notes of journals of things to read. So there'll be lots of fun, personifications of these sort of things in a different way, whether it's an NPC or an item or an enemy or whatever. There's definitely references. What about the weapons? I saw your range of weapons from the stone-headed. Yes, so that's we mentioned earlier that there is a large variety of weapons. So right now we're exploring the main three weapon types we currently have exploring being the revolvers, rifles, and shotguns. Those are three of the most prominent weapon archetypes, right? That we're trying to nail down. And that's from VFX to SFX to in-game gonna make it really cool. Very, very cool. Regarding things like bows and arrows, Gatling guns, they are period appropriate. It's we're just trying to find ways to express that makes sense in the game. So whatever that may be. We're not exactly sure what it is, but I think we'll probably have a little bit of everything in there. It's gonna be like, when you go to a diner and get the appetizer sampler. We're gonna have the mozzarella stick, you're gonna have the jalapeno popper. How open will you be to showing drop rates? It's a good question. So drop rates for seeded things, I don't think. Yeah, I mean anything that's non-dynamic or variable for its rates after a period of full release, we could definitely. I mean, it'll be data mined to a degree regardless, but yeah, we're not gonna purposely cloak and dagger and like lie. We're very transparent about what we're doing, but as long as it's not going to impede your experience. For the early access leading up to it and during it, and then until launch, is going to be a period of numerical fluidity. GOG and I will be working numbers and ideas pretty much on a weekly basis. I'm sure we'll have a lot of things changing pretty constantly, which is when we enter a more public-facing QA period. We'll rely on, a lot of you guys for nailing down that feel, and then this sort of symbiotic relationship will yield the best result. But, if you're asking for an example of something like PoE for reference that has Shaper has drop rates and they choose not to share them for no other reason besides they just don't want to, I can't imagine we're going to do that. If it's a thing with seeded rates, like the way that RuneScape does it, I think is great, which is for the first month that content is released, in whatever form that may be. The first month, that's your period of mystery, where it's like, figure it out. And then after that, they just tweet the flat rates, which I think is perfectly acceptable. Because when we have, a wiki and we have all that more stuff set up and an infrastructure, it's like, there's a lot of numbers in our game. We have a lot of intricate roles and affixes. Yeah, I don't think there's any benefit to balancing silently. This could also be something that GOG and I disagree on potentially, but the players will work it out. I like things not to be done silently because I think it doesn't make it any better. But that's absolutely something we'll explore, and it'll be down the line either way. Do you have a plan to have any Easter eggs? Oh God, yes. You know, we have so many ideas for Easter eggs and sort of little flourishes. It's a laundry list. If you have any suggestions for certain ones you'd like to see referenced that we could somehow twist and turn in a different way, you know, we'd love to hear them. Oh, I agree. That was so like the not to get too in the weeds, but the sort of behavior that GOG is describing, which is especially because our game is going to be initially set in offline single player, which is ostensibly solo self-found, right? We're going to design it in such a way that farming out specific things is absolutely possible, might require larger amounts of time for larger impact items, but absolutely possible. And if we did a change that was so drastic, equivalent to swapping a drop rate on an Uber boss massively, I cannot imagine a scenario where we wouldn't at least reference that it has been changed. We might not give you the exact numbers in that moment, but we would say we have, something akin to we have balanced that boss's drop rates. So be warned if trying to build around it, because I don't like bad faith changes, and I really am big on respecting of the player's time, especially for all the people who don't have a ton of time to play. So with those sort of changes, we'll definitely communicate that something has been changed. Maybe not necessarily the exact values because of we want to have a blanket of mystery in that way, but our goal is not to dick you over. No. Trading system has been discussed in an umbrella sense because we're launching in an offline single player state. So we would explore trade in the future, basically. When we get to that, if we transition to a multiplayer model, but that'll be past EA, I would say. There are specific cards that are currently crazy rare, but we're not locked into something specifically. Because it's just one of those things, we like the idea, some of the cards that are really strong are akin to something like a top-end Ventor's Gamble in PoE, or not quite like Mage Blood territory, but we're gonna really massively test them because they're just objectively very powerful. But we like the idea of things being strong eventually. That's not really a problem, I don't think. It's a good question though. This is a good question, and I'm going to answer it very tactfully because it requires tactful answering. Do you plan on drawing on the varied and deep mythologies of Native American Western tribes? So on the subject of Native American culture, which is unquestionably tied to Western America in this time period, it's obviously very sensitive. We are having nothing in direct reference to Native American culture to just avoid that pitfall, essentially. There is some aspects of things in the game that are tied to the period, but not specifically referencing at all Native American culture, because it's just a minefield that we don't have any interest trying to navigate. So regarding that, we're just not even touching it because it just isn't, the juice ain't worth the squeeze. So in terms of mythology, we are tapping into general area cryptology. So, right, the idea is that things like maybe what would be like a skinwalker or like a chupacabra or like the New Jersey Devil, but not New Jersey. Things like that that are not tied to a necessarily culture intrinsically, but just tied to the cryptology of the era. Bigfoot, Tham Squanch. That sort of stuff we have some sort of explorations for. I don't want to specify what exactly the enemy types are or what they may be, but there's some fun things like that. Exactly. So we are steering clear of that definitely at this time. Have you taken inspiration from other fantasy Western media, like the Deadlands tabletop RPG or movies? So that's a good question. Not direct inspiration from any specific form of media when it comes to Western references, just the general entire palette of Western occult, that era of America. But it's a cool thing you reference the tabletop RPGs, etc. Because we do have some sort of things we're exploring in that area in the tabletop area when it comes to potential secret promo assets, maybe. I don't want to say too much there. Will I be able to play? It will be, we're going to be releasing an early access in a single player offline mode, and then work on sort of like huge content chunks as we head towards what would be the 1.0. We don't have any specific dates or times yet for a long-term thing because we don't want to make nothing's worse than over-promising and under-delivering. So we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it right, and we'll communicate whatever time frames there are as we get them. I don't want to push back, a league to 12 months. We don't want to end up in Settlers League. What is a canyon whistler, Bonky? This sounds like who uses a bow with arrows. Oh, okay. So you're thinking, okay, that's like the guy from Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, we're not going to be able to control arrows in midair like Yondu. Was that his name? Yeah, we're not going to have Yondu. It's a great idea, though. It's a super great idea of Yondu. Fresh from the Guardians of the Galaxy. After sitting down in a tavern and eating a massive amount of beans and an entire loaf of bread, such as in the Western movie They Call Me Trinity. I love that film. We watched that in our Discord. Well, your character got bust. Yeah. So I could, to your point. So first off, have you ever seen the movie? There's actually a few movies. I believe it's 3 or 4 from the Trinity. They Call Me Trinity Western film. Sergio Leone, maybe? I can't remember who was in it, but it's very, very classic Western movies. They're like kind of pseudo comedies. But the scene is the guy walks in to a tavern covered in just mud and shit, and then he sits at the table and he says, "Give me beans and bread." And the guy brings over this huge 5-pound metal skillet of beans and bread. It begins to put them on the plate, and then the guy rips the skillet from his hand, throws it on the table, scrapes his plate back onto it, and just sits there eating 5 pounds of fucking beans and just bean maxes, and then undoubtedly farts for a week straight. And there is a character in game who currently has a farting mechanic, so maybe he did live the bean life, such as that. How much do you plan to draw from established dark fantasy and occult sources such as medieval European folklore, the Lesser Key of Solomon, and Gothic literature like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein? This is the set of your AI gen questions, Bonky, I see. So it's actually a good question as of such. When it comes to the kind of low fantasy back-end mythology of the game, most of which that won't even be present in the game, like I mentioned earlier, you might just get references of it. It was all handwritten by me, including the initial language and symbolism and scripture then given to our art director, and she did a wonderful job bringing it to life as of such to be used in the game for symbology. That was, it was all written, and there was some definite references, I would say, and certain rules of naming schemes that were taken from the Lesser Key of Solomon, the Ars Goetia book, right? So not so much Gothic literature like Frankenstein, but more just like that original kind of crypto-European writing and hieroglyphics, that sort of stuff from that book would definitely be a reference there. That might be more of an in-depth answer to your AI gen question than you explained, but yes. Will there be references to recognizable figures or archetypes inspired by works such as H.P. Lovecraft? No. There will not be any Cthulhus running around, unfortunately. No Cthulhus, no Dagons, no, what are the ones? The yellow Carcosa? Is that the yellow king, maybe? Yeah, none of them. But you did mention Berserk, which is interesting because as a Berserk is kind of the level of brutality at times we are kind of encapsulating. So not remotely looking like that, but the vibe check of something like a Berserk is definitely there. Will there be major genre defining events such as Ragnarok? So there are absolutely in-world events that happen on different scopes and scales. You just might not be privy to them at this stage of your character's development, without a question. You are ultimately a man in this world. Um, you know, going forward, it's you're not some benevolent god. You're not some crazy miscreation who's able to shoot the sun out of the sky in that way. So although you personify a larger than life character, maybe you're not causing the rapture. Um, let's see. More questions. Will there be any base building aspects? That's not a bad question. I definitely won't say no in the sense of it's not. I mean, you're not going to be building a base. I don't think as a way to like a mainline mechanic, but there might be a representation of a physical structure in town evolving over time. We're gonna in such a way display the passage of time. With that might come environments evolving, right? So say there was maybe a shack that was like ramshackled and run down, possibly as time progresses in game through quests or function or however, right? You could see it maybe then become occupied and developed in such a way. But not really a base building, more just the natural evolution of the world around you. Because world building is a main through line of our game and a key point, we wanted to, really encapsulate the sense that as you're progressing through the game, making these choices, doing these quests, hitting these milestones, there is a level of passage of time. Like things are still happening around you, So that would definitely be part of it. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Another question regarding the single player. Yeah, currently we're launching an offline single player, but we're eventually explore the optionality of multiplayer, online trade, all that way down the road. We're going to get our footing first. I don't think we have a set expansion model per se, but and regarding replayability, we're going to have an amount of endgame that is replayable to the extent of you could sink a large chunk of time into it, and it's going to be incentivized to do so and work your character and min-max and have fun and explore different build dynamics for sure. Does the Dark West imply the existence of a Light East? Yes. So that was actually an in-house joke we made. Was that the second game as such would be called the Light East, and I pitched it as basically just Slay the Spire, but with Dynasty Warrior characters. Which, even as a joke, I think would absolutely sell. If you made Slay the Spire and mixed it with Dynasty Warriors and had all the cool East Asian deities like the Wukongs and the Ryzens and the Nizas, that game would sell, all right? Someone would buy it for sure. Great. Will I be jumped by a Yeti while sledding down the mountains like in Ski Free? No, but I like the idea of a Yeti character. We talked about, a Sasquatch. Maybe there'll be a 1 in 10,000 Sasquatch, Sasquatch spawn. How impactful will the dysentery debuff be? Yeah, so that was actually a question my wife asked as well, which was, I'm assuming you can get dysentery like an Oregon Trail. I would be remiss if we didn't add some sort of, dysentery tie-in in some way. That definitely sounds like a very fun idea. Big on Team Dysentery. Very cool. Will there be horses or other mounts in games such as trains? So that's a question we have asked internally. We currently don't have any mount systems planned, but depending on the size of zones, that might be something we explore. I don't think it'll be something we explore heavily, and it definitely isn't a priority right now. But yeah, it's on the horizon in some way. There's a train. You mentioned trains also. I don't want to go into much detail regarding it, but we do have a mechanic in game where you ride a train and clear it as of such to push higher rewards, higher risk from a car to car thing. So that'll be a fun, cool mechanic. Train-based mechanics. Will the game have a day-night cycle that affects what can happen based on what time you're playing? That's also something we've talked about. I'd like to have it for sure. I think if we could add it, it'd be a cool dynamic. In my mind, I just think about like Pokemon, catching different Pokemon. This is day versus night. It does pose some technical, issues, but I think if we could, there will be a display of the passage of time as of such, especially like as you progress from different zones. When you go into underground zones, it'll be different light dynamics as well versus overworld zones. So they'll be like definitely playing with the light dynamics for sure. I'm almost out of coffee. This is truly a tragic. Can my character become addicted to tobacco, alcohol, and morphine? That's a great question. We have so our game is definitely, I'm not sure the exact rating, but it is a mature game because of the violence and the themes. We have currently an alcohol system in game. You can actually see the the slots on the right side of the character. These are the two alcohol kind of consumable slots. With those slots, and the mechanic is currently up for revision. I'll probably be working on it this week, actually. Alcohol has a couple different roles currently in game. Affix roles, right? The intensity of the alcohol is scaling the effect of the alcohol, right? So the higher an alcohol's intensity, and there's a variety of different types, from beer to wine to high spirits, and kind of more, occult high spirits as of such, like snake venom or whatever, right? Okay. So the higher the intensity, the higher the effect of the alcohol. But it's also intrinsically scaled to a higher level of intoxication. And the more your intoxication you have from drinking, we had currently set up some sort of intoxication internal meter where if you drank a ton of alcohol, it would have a negative debilitating effect as if you would get a hangover, right? Um, so like we're currently trying to mess with those systems because I would say the current in-game framework is like too punishing for a standardized player-wide experience. But we love the idea of the kind of kiss curse of consuming large amounts of alcohol in a very quick time scheme, right? So if you were to drink your consumable buffs more sparingly, you would have a much lesser effect. Like much lesser negative effect, and then a much slower build up to your toxification. But then the more you drank, the quicker, and then the quicker intervals, you'd eventually just like get blood poisoning to a degree and get totally shit faced. And I believe the current references to this in game are things as such like your screen going black or shaking or it's blurry, like different really brutal ones. So obviously we can't have like too many, ones that are like so stringent because if like your screen went black, well, even to showcase one of the ones I pitched, which is like beyond brutal, but it would have to be tied to some very like the idea is that the more powerful the alcohol is also like if you just drank moonshine, like a jug of moonshine. I actually think that the current Fallout show showed this pretty well, where one of the characters was doing a bunch of drugs and had like massive side effects. But if you were drinking a ton of moonshine, you might get like a really large buff for a medium portion of time. But one of the downsides I initially proposed that was like the most extreme example of this, obviously turning your screen off would be the most extreme, but because movement is a WASD, I was thinking, what if we inverted your controls? Like if you drank grain liquor for like a minute straight, like your controls would get inverted, and then your screen would be blinking on and off, and then it would be blurry. Like it would try to just mess with every lever because it would have to be so funny because it would literally be, yeah. The idea is you'd remap it. So like part of the things that we thought about why you couldn't necessarily have that as a mainline function is you're just griefing. It's just too much, right? but B, also like someone you could just hotkey it, auto hotkey around it. So without question, alcohol is going to take some sort of fun space in the game for minor player power and bursts of minor power, but we're going to definitely tweak it, carefully, knowingly as we balance it, because it has to have a decent upside with a downside that's appropriate. Maybe not turning off your monitor, maybe not, uninstalling the game, like something as strong as that. But, you get the idea. Oh boy, is it that time already? Is it root beer o'clock? That didn't make any noise. I was hoping for like a crack or a pop, but sorry, it's not root beer. It's sarsaparilla from the 1850s. That's good. Thanks, partner. Okay. Will any aspects? Yeah, no. It is actually carbonated. It's just I'm just too strong. I uncorked it instantly. Will any aspects of the game be unnecessarily time-gated like in phone games? Fuck no. This is like, not to toot my own horn, but the benefit of having somebody like where myself and Sir Gog are working on this is we are massive filters. When I'm mentioning like we're going to not fall in any of the pitfalls, and it's like, this is where Gog was saying the large ones, because we're pretty large filters for mechanics that don't feel good and don't respect the player and don't make sense and don't mathematically jive and don't fit in the game space. Like none of that sort of stuff is really going to fall through the cracks. So is there something that might be slightly out of tune numerically based off of certain play times? Maybe. But in no way is it going to be like, this is dog shit. Like we would never allow that to happen, basically. That's the TLDR, is we're just not going to allow any aspect of the game to feel massively unnecessary, massively unworth it. If it's in the game, it's going to be fun, it's going to be incentivized to engage with, and it's going to feel appropriate in relation to the rest of the game. Will the game have a good evil system or any form of reputation system that follows your character based on your actions? So, actually, yes. In not so much good or evil, but more just levels of alignment. So we mentioned earlier in the stream that we have these two major factions that exist in the town and the world we're set in, where it's this kind of more affluent, militaristic order, and then these more downtrodden, scrappy, fringe people of the damned. This sort of social dynamic that exists between them. And a large portion of what we're trying to accomplish with the world building is that as you're progressing through the game, you're making these decisions that is in alignment with either of them or a level of staying neutral. And based off of your decisions, we're hoping to make it so you can see the impact of those systems passively. Not to say that at the end of your play experience, you think, oh, damn, I can't access this thing because I didn't choose the right affiliation. That's like a level of FOMO we don't want. We want you to be incentivized to replay it, to experience the other side of that coin, but not to feel bad because you didn't get to see the other side of the coin, And they'll have more of a world impact and a lore impact than necessarily an in-game impact. Now, the types of enemies you engage with in those encounters might shift, but they're going to be variably scaled and balanced to where it won't feel like you're missing out massively by making one decision. Like, you still might want to chase Steam achievements, that's one thing, but it won't be like, I didn't pick this thing, therefore I can't play this build. We're going to make sure that sort of stuff, again, the almighty Gog and Lighty filter will catch that, right? So a lot of these sort of faction choices also are, you could kind of see the explanation for both sides. It's like when an event occurs, it's not necessarily good versus evil, It's like they're both like moral quandaries as of such. It might be one person's stole something, but they stole it to feed their family. It's still stealing, but there's like, this sort of deeper meaning behind it. So like a lot of those sort of scenarios. But it's a good question. Will I be able to? It's a great question. Will I be able to cowboy camp under the stars to gain an increased experience the following time I play? So as we discussed the idea of having the passage of time or day-night cycle in game, one of those sort of systems is like, how do you represent that? I could see that being a way like you representing while you're out, choosing to pass an amount of time for a reason, right? And making maybe you camp out as a way of like doing the pastime animation. So I can see that being a thing, but not as a way of like sleeping and therefore gaining more experience in the next playthrough. Because any system that enables you to gain experience in the following playthrough or seeded bonus experience probably didn't do its baseline experience math correctly. Otherwise, it'll just happen naturally. What is the current roadmap of the game? Well, we're going to launching in early access in a single player offline experience, then working towards a 1.0 in some timescape. Exact dates you'll see posted eventually, and as long as you're on the Discord, on the wish list on Steam, following the socials, you'll be the first ones to know. I recommend the wish list on Steam is a very good thing to do because it'll also keep you updated on news posts and those devlogs we do. So Discord, Steam, those are some of the big dogs for following and staying on track. How do you design around and handle friction? Are there any specific goals you have in mind when you flesh out a mechanic? Yes, that's a great question. So the basis of it is identifying what we're missing as a mechanic, what's a good gap to fill. Can we use this in multiple places? Is this something that will feel good and fun to interact with? Does it serve a purpose? And then thematically fitting it to the area. The way we go about it is somewhat of a workshop setting, I would say. We start these like brainstorm sessions, and it could be as simple as, wouldn't it be cool if we had this sort of experience? Where could that fit? How would that fit? Does it make sense? How do we balance it? What are the technical limitations of it? One of the things we were discussing is the idea of like setting non-NPC environmental objects to have life pools, and then having those life pools dictate loot. So the idea that like maybe you defend a physical structure, like a treasure chest or something, and the more it got shot, the less loot you get at the end. Or the inverse, the idea that you shoot it during a time frame, and if you break it in time, there's like a pinata of whatever, those sort of things. And say, oh, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Working through it, and then you get to the implementation, testing, and then we tweak numbers and see if it is in relative relation to the rest of the game. We have like basic, like a human body mapped out with different limbs taking up different amounts of your body. Basic ideas about where power comes from. I'm sure Gog will type about this more in chat, but the idea that like, a portion of the player power comes from the skill tree. A portion is from natural level up. A portion is from gear. A portion is from your weapon. A portion is from the cards. These all things are, live in relation to each other. So it has to maintain the sort of like relative nature to each different mechanic for it to be appropriate. Otherwise, one thing becomes way too strong. Sometimes we set them too strong or more strong because they deserve more of an identity. So an example of that is weapons. Weapons are, I believe, set up in such a way that they are simply more important than the rest of your gear, which makes sense. I can't kill a man with a boot as easily as I could with a revolver, right? So if you were to be naked and have to pick one slot, it would make sense that the weapon is the strongest, So the idea that like weapons will be more scarce, but of a higher quality, you could work towards developing and crafting them and refining them in some way. So really returning the power and identity to loot is like a big portion of our mission statement here. When do you think there's too much friction, and what do you think a mechanic is not interactive enough? That's a good question. So too much friction, I would say you pretty much figure out from testing immediately, right? You just know if people are not having fun, that's too much friction. If like 10% of the people are not having fun, then, and they can specifically identify it's because of this one thing. That's more of a conversation. But it's just like, it depends on who you're trying to target. Certain things are more or less than others. It's just a matter of doing it. And about interactive enough, I think it's okay to have interactivity in 3 different buckets. So I'd say the main thing when it comes to mechanics and side mechanics especially, like zone mechanics, side mechanics, a shrine system, a standardized shrine in Diablo, Path of Exile in our game, is low interactivity, high approachability. It has low overall impact, low overall duration, but high approachability. You walk up to a shrine, you click a shrine, it does a thing, it lasts like a minute, whatever, and then that event is done. There's very little complication and interactivity in that system. The buffs it gives might interact with those systems different ways, but the actual scope of it is quite low. Clicking a corpse in the ground, clicking an environmental asset, clicking a treasure chest, low interactivity, high approachability. You start to add mimics in the game, for example. Now you've increased the interactivity and decreased the approachability, because now you're going to be leery every time you see a chest in a game that has mimics. So these are levers you could effectively play with, and it's just like about the psychology of choosing which your player to approach them and how. It's good to have a good spread of these things, because you want to have mechanics that are kind of mechanically complicated, kind of more in-depth and less approachable, less intricate, more intricate but less easily clickable, and then also having other things around them, because they play into each other. If every single mechanic in your zone was like an expedition in PoE, you'd get burnt out. It'd be like, I'm so done doing this back to back to back to back to back. But if it's once in every 10 zones, for example, naturally spawning, it's like, oh, it's a treat to engage with it versus a chore. So that's the real battle, is identifying that it has to be rewarding in either experience, like in-game experience, or numerical experience, or actual loot, right? It has to give you something worthwhile, or create an experience worthwhile. If something happened that looks really fucking cool, it matters much less how much experience it gives and how much loot it gives. If it gives a ton of loot, you don't care about the experience. If it gives a ton of experience, you're less caring about the loot, right? So it's a matter of just finding that balance, And because the game is set in an offline single player experience, we can curate that experience to a degree. We are exploring the ideas of having different zone generations. But as of right now, from the base campaign, it's going to be like pseudo-seeded. So you'll be appropriately drip fed the mechanics in such a way and introduced to them that you'll understand them and engage with them at a pace that we're initially setting. So we're going to make sure you have a good time, basically, right? An endgame mechanic and the endgame system's a different thing. But for your initial playthrough of that first campaign setting, it's kind of like, we could curate it, every sort of experience leading up to what we want you to lead with. So you're going to have the appropriate skills at the appropriate time with the appropriate level of know-how. You never feel out of depth. So we're not in any way holding your hand. We're pointing to the door. You have to go over there, open it, and walk through it. But we're going to give you enough of a framework that you know what's going on. Other companies often struggle with an online-only workforce. Do you have any struggles with that? Or something that you do differently to keep everyone on the same page? It's a good question. So it's less of a game question, more of a company question. Within our team, are working on this project, there is a lot of different people in a lot of different time zones. So we are naturally compartmentalized because of our availability. So we make sure we have meetings and communication is open so that we could always work on projects in the most efficient way going forward. Obviously, sometimes there's hiccups with that. In the same sense that when I am doing development stuff with GOG at nighttime, he is in a different part of the universe than I'm in, damn near the opposite. So for me to stay up to what his nighttime is, I'm staying up till 3, 4 a.m. So that is like an IRL hurdle, for just to get around. Or if I want to be at a certain meeting, I might have to be up then the next day at 8 a.m. if I want to meet with the the Brazilian programmer or whatever. So it's like that just navigating that is part of it. This is why naps exist. This is why we have coffee. You just get through it. Will the game have support for ultra-wide screen monitors? That's a good question. I'm pretty sure. I can double check, but we're going to go through all these Q&A questions and vet them with the departments eventually for more clarified answers if needed, but I'm pretty sure that the UI assets that Dan created are scalable. I'm pretty sure. I think I remember him mentioning that. So if not, I don't think that's a very tricky thing to do either. The more question is, when you have ultra wide, it's not just about the UI scaling. You actually gain a in-game advantage because you could see things more than people can see in game. I don't know what way that'll be expressed because I don't think it's something we've tested, nor is it remotely important at the moment. For us, it's definitely low priority as of right now, but we're definitely cognizant of that existing. Like ultra wides are more popular now than they were because they keep getting cheaper. The game is solo offline, to be fair, so it would work, but it would be one of those things where it would, I'm not sure how we'd have to express that, but it's something we'll think about going forward, especially if we were to transition out of solo offline. It would feel bad to take it away, right? I'm not sure. That's a good question. But yeah, it's not something on our radar as like, yeah, we're going to force you in 4x3. It was so funny. We were just watching, a couple nights ago, we were watching in my Discord a movie, an old movie from 1960, 62 maybe? Mr. Sardonicus was the movie. It's like an old horror movie. Anyway, it was not in 4x. It was in 16:9, shot native then, which is like to think that things were in shot in a better format, better resolution. But then I see things from the 80s to the 2000s that are in 4x3, and I'm like, what is even going on? 4x3 is funny. The beginning of the movie, The Lighthouse, the Robert Pattinson, Willem Dafoe movie, it actually begins the film in forced 4x3, and then transitions out of it. So resolution is definitely something to keep in mind. You could just see more, so it is becoming a thing. Okay, next question. Will the game have changing weather that affects gameplay, such as scorching sun, dust, tornadoes, locust swarms? We're getting a bit biblical here. Lightning, hail, earthquakes, flash flooding, mudslides, and wildfires. Environmental and seasonal things are something we're absolutely exploring. Currently, I believe they're best expressed through environmental biomes and regional areas. Meaning it would make sense that we can have a tornado in the desert, but not so much in the mines. So it's going to be, when we express weather, it's going to be localized to what would make sense in game for the areas. Having a tornado in the swamp would also not make sense because of like the different humidity leading to maybe barometric pressure, but maybe something like a flash flood in the canyons would make sense. So we could definitely tie them in to mechanics and environmental regions as long as it makes sense. And it's something we're absolutely exploring already. Locust swarm could be an enemy entity. We do have swarming as of such from certain enemy types, like spawning large quantities of these crow things, So like maybe having loci as an enemy and then representing them as a swarm would be one thing. But as long as it makes sense, we're able to explore it. But it would also just have to be, something we approach sensitively because a lot of these sort of things obfuscate player visibility massively. If there's a dust storm and your entire game is grainy, are you like having a great time? Is the question, It still has to be fun. So as long as it makes sense, we're open to it. Is the story of the game player focused? Is the story of the game player focused like hero fantasy, i.e. WoW, or character focused with different interactions in the story? It's a good question. So someone answered this earlier when it's like you, the player, are still a human in the world. So it's focused around your interaction with the world around you, the factions, the townsfolk, the environments, that sort of stuff. So it's player focused in that sense, but things are still happening around you, even if it's not happening to you. And we are still just a man, although we have higher skills in certain areas. It's not going to be like we are this like savior dynamic, or we are the Superman of the game. If you stood still for 5 seconds, like, a rabbit would kill you if it was just not gnawing at your feet as of such early in the game, right? So it's not going to be like you're some sort of immortal titan. It's it's set in a much more pseudo realistic way. Will you take inspiration from Weird West settings as it's very occult heavy plus cryptids? Yeah, I think we answered this one pretty spot on earlier. There is definitely heavy occult influences. Cryptology is a great example of period appropriate occult stuff we can represent, especially for NPCs and enemies. So there's like no shortage of stuff like that we could draw from. What will the pricing structure look like? Great question. Single player offline suggests one-time player one-time pay base game plus paid DLC. If you're looking to add online multiplayer on that introduces significant running costs, will you add MTX later on? All right, so there's like 3 different questions in there. The pay structure currently is something we're beginning to discuss because the game's launching in single player offline. That is also something we're thinking about with added optionality. Is there a structure in which the pay dynamic possibly shifts as more content goes on down the road? That's definitely possible, but it's, for lack of a better term, above my personal pay grade. So you will hear communication from that going forward, especially when we get more towards what would be our EA launch. When we release things like our gameplay trailer, cinematic trailer, more codified things, we'll have a much more stable message when it comes to what we're thinking about that, but we don't want to necessarily pigeonhole ourselves in one certain way or overpromise, underdeliver, so we're keeping that in mind. I do agree that running multiplayer does have active costs of running, so that if we were to explore it down the road, I'm sure there'd be some reflection of that. And same thing for MTX. We don't have anything in stone yet, but not to say we can't or won't do that. It would definitely be appropriate to the game. I think a good example of something that's not appropriate to the game is a large portion of thing like Path of Exile's MTXs have gone like totally off the rails as far as theme. The quality of them objectively is quite high, right? But you just have things that are like super high fantasy and like borderline, like thematically all over the place. So if we do anything like that, we would definitely have it in line with the themes, the character, the times. It would have to make sense, right? Okay. Live with okay, cool. We have a document from Brandon. Is this the document? Let me see. My dark reader's so dark. I think we have the questions now from chat. I gotta scroll. Live questions. Here we go. All right. I've got a new set of questions. And to answer your question, Bonky, yes, we'll only host servers in Arizona to make it thematic. All right, some of these have already been answered, but I'll try to work through them just as of such. I think, again, we touched upon the idea of the controller or Steam Deck support. Because it's WASDA, I believe that's easier to implement. Doesn't mean we'll necessarily have it. I'm not going to promise it right now, but I do think that inherently means there's less of an issue of being lost in translation for controller mapping, right? Because WASD is moving not strictly 8-point directional like you would, and it's like much more fluid that a controller can adopt to it. So I'm thinking that shouldn't be an issue. Yeah. What else we have? What progression types? Okay, so that's a good question. Um, what progression types do the characters have? Tree-based, raw stat page, D&D multi-class. Okay, so we currently have a few different ways of progressing through the character power. We're still not totally solidified on the extent of it, but the idea is that you have character. I think Gog actually wrote a specific answer for this, but it's like you have character power coming from stats from leveling, from your class's skill tree. You have character coming from gear, weapons, and also from cards. So inventory, then character level ups, and also a skill tree. So it's a culmination of all these things. Let's see what else we have. Are you guys thinking of a demo on Steam? It's a good question. I don't know actually what we're doing with that, but I know that as always, when it comes to any sort of larger information like that, we're looking at spaces for different event shows, and that could be something where we initially host what will be a playable outward demo. And then that would maybe translate to something like a very small iteration on Steam. But we'll have a much more solid message towards that as we work towards launch. Will my gun have a chance to jam or possibly backfire? That is a great question. So, for one of the classes, the gunslinger, he is a revolver master. And as such, he has a lot of different ways of expressing loving, his revolver. We are currently exploring not only a passive talent expression, but also an active weapon type that does have a sort of timing-based punishment where if you do not necessarily input things in the correct order or in the correct time frame 2 milliseconds, there is a penalty of disabled fire, i.e. gun jamming. And that's what I mentioned when I referenced initially that certain classes will have certain kind of like skill gap ways of displaying themselves. Is that if you choose to go down this certain road that you're not forced to go down, but you can go down, you will on paper have a much higher yield, much higher ceiling for expression. But there's some things have ridiculous mechanical intricacies where that might yield to your gun jamming or not firing. So that's a very fun question, but we got some goofy expressions of that. Okay. Having quick hands and using sleight of hand is a theme that shows up in many forms throughout Westerns. Will there be some form of sleight of hand in one way or another? You have the card system implemented already. Will there be a card throwing build? Well, okay. So with the card system, I don't think right now we have a card throwing thing because that's a little maybe too unrealistic that it would be able to, that's maybe on the cusp, right? But regarding sleight of hand, we do have in our town a saloon where you can do card mini games like play poker and at the time, what else was there? Pharaoh, I think, was the other period appropriate card game. Pharaoh was a card game that was showcased in the movie Tombstone. If you remember ever seen that, they had a Pharaoh table. So one of the intricacies of that mechanic that I was exploring is the idea that you could attempt to like cheat, basically, and then if you got caught, there would be some huge repercussions, But the idea that like maybe you could try to express yourself through like a micro cheat there, like try to snag an extra card or something, and then a guy would knife your hand or you get killed or whatever, right? So or get kicked out for a day, which is I think pretty fun. So definitely having some sort of expressions like that. Mm-hmm. Lou Diamond Phillips, big time. All right, and okay, so it was assuming you have fast travel. Is it flavored like Magic or Stagecoach Train? So we do have a portal system. It is that is occult based. So it's like with runes and scripts scribed into the ground in stone to allow your character to travel from effectively waystone to waystone. And then we do have an expression of that through a portal system. So you will not have to run back 9 miles every time you finish clearing an area. This is again where I mean by like respecting the player's time and experience and like the rule of cool. Like identifying items will not take a currency. Using a portal will not take a currency. That sort of stuff is just not fun. You know, like will the game have a glossary? Absolutely, because like this, you know, these are sort of things that people need to have in this day and age, and not having these sort of things is kind of inexcusable. You know, so it's just like we have to maintain the idea of the game's integrity, but without question, like a lot of these things, like you just can't have anymore. This is where, again, like a blank slate. If a game like PoE could start over, you could see it in PoE too, like the idea of, you know, even probably just cutting portal systems and, or, you know, the need for that entirely initially, where it's like we just have moved on. Certain archaic systems just aren't acceptable anymore. So yes, you could portal. You know, IDing doesn't require you to necessarily, like, we're not gonna. I don't think we're gonna have like a well, you know, to refill your flask. You have to click or type in a QR code, you know, or whatever captcha. It's like we want you shooting things. We want you killing things. We want you having fun. We want you to be enjoying yourself in the Dark West, you know, not worrying about, you know, you have to fill out your 401k to make sure you identify an item. So it's a matter of that. But yeah, that's pretty much it for our questions. I don't know if you guys have any more, feel free to ask them. We're like good on time in general. Yeah, I could see a well system existing in a zone, but not in a town as a requirement, more as like a beneficial system for sure. That's kind of like very Diablo style, where it's like, oh, I'm low on pots, let me click it and refill it, you know, or get your alcohol back up or something. Like imagine the idea of a barrel just sitting in the desert with like a drink scoop, and it's like you just like refill your whiskey with whatever swill you just grabbed. Favorite item, system, or detail about the game you've come across so far? I mean, I'm pretty partial to the card system because it's one that I've latched onto, but really anything that we've been kind of to cook, you know, Sir Gog and I have been working through has been really exciting. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but when we were finishing up the framework for the Gunslinger class and its current full suite implementation of its skills and etc., we thought of an idea of a skill, and then Gog really put the icing on the cake there. You know, where it's like a channeled ricochet style ability, that like, you know, pinballs a projectile around, and like you could, the longer you hold it, the better the angle gets and the more it chains. Like there's a lot of things where I'm really excited to hop in gameplay. The card system for sure is one of the ones that I've put the most time in. And that's like obviously the most flavor expression for things that like I don't have to hold hands as much, because like I was just letting loose for keystone type things. But yeah. And then for Kickstarter things, we definitely have Kickstarter stuff taken. Yeah, the idea you mentioned of the graves on markers was one of the ones we thought of initially. I'm not sure the exact state of the current Kickstarter thing where it comes. Like I know we're gonna have probably something set up, but and it will express like a lot of cool fun flourish with that. You know, when it comes to like physical assets or, you know, things like that, or one of the ones we are talking about was like having a poker deck of cards representative of the same one we have in game. Like a printout one is huge. Yeah, no, it's very exciting, Iron Forge. There's like a lot of the cards we're expressing also like are super unique, but like again, that's where Gog and I have to look through the numbers because they're a bit game breaking. So the idea that like a card might, you know, limit your projectile count to 1, but give you like uncapped chain or just something, just really crazy things, because a lot of them we could set the limits for them and set the drawbacks. So it's going to be I dare I say things like Mage Blood and Headhunter as levels of top end stuff, but you could see things being expressed to that level of ridiculous, but also set in the world's framework. So we can't get too wacky crazy with it. But yeah, definitely follow us around. We'll be doing these sort of things. Hopefully, much more, and then getting more feedback and more to share. We have a lot of stuff. We're on the precipice of finishing cooking up, so a lot of fun things to show you. A lot of goods. But if there's no more questions, I think we're probably okay for our first little Q&A section. Go Pack, yeah. The Dark West. Big fan of Carolina sports. Yeah, so regarding a crafting system, we're leaning more towards item refinement and less crafting from scratch. PoE, I would say, is more like crafting from scratch than item refinement. Items are going to be more rare, but of a higher quality. So I don't want to say something like ruthless is like too far of an example, but we're not going to be having an item filter because you shouldn't need one. When items are dropping, they're going to feel like they matter. There's going to be appropriate systems set up to recycle items or utilize items for further crafting or benefit. You know, the idea that you have to hold alt and hide your entire game is, to me, like beyond goofy. And yeah, we're going to be, when this VOD goes down, I'm pretty sure we should be, I don't see why we can't. We should be able to place the video on YouTube for those who couldn't watch. And if you want to reference certain points, we should be able to auto-generate chapters also. We just obviously started this Twitch channel, and like this is like our first live stream going forward. So I'm pretty sure it should be able to archive it. Like archiving, I think, is fine for VODs. But part of why we're working, doing like streaming on the games Twitch and like our games Twitch and moving forward versus like the individual people's is because we'd like to work towards getting affiliate and partner, because that enables certain archival features for us that will be definitely useful as we, progress the game over the next years. Yeah, so it's gonna be like a nice combination of ground loot and crafting, but the idea is that like if you find a weapon on the ground of rarity or higher than you're currently, it should be an upgrade or be usable to upgrade your weapon in such a way. If an item drops in the ground, if a weapon drops in the ground especially, and you aren't incentivized to pick it up, that's a numerical failure on our front. So a lot of our internal testing is going to be identifying those things and then tweaking the numbers to make them appropriate. I would love a gold panning minigame. I would absolutely love one, Bonky. That's the sort of like flourish we're going to be putting on things like that as we get closer to EA and maybe even after it. Is little things like that especially. Yeah, I've definitely I know some of the people at Crate Entertainment that made Grim Dawn, and I've played the game pretty extensively, and it's the same thing where like I'm sure if they can go back and not have a filter, they'd like to, because it's just one of those things where it's hard to retrofit a culture for a game, especially once you set like a stable tone for this is like the standard in our game. A lot of the times it's really hard to work back with that. So even something like in Grim Dawn, the amount of resistances they have is something that they maybe would have, if they had a clean slate, they would probably do it differently, Where, and like, this is any game is going to have something like that, but we're going to try to not have as many of those or as little of them as possible. Those sort of things where no regrets, No regrets across the board. Yeah, I think like gearing is a big thing. There's a lot to go. Yeah, Elevate resistances. It's also like the difference is when a game is not high fantasy, and you don't have a ton of melee architecture, it's a lot harder to represent resistances innately, because you're not going to have like lightning, jungle damage, fairy damage. It's just, how do you represent the idea of being shot or something like that as 8 different resistances? It's like much more challenging. A lager. A lager like the job or a lager like the beer? Medium range resistance. Yeah. So then the second you move forward, the resistance category changes. He's no longer medium. It's one of those things also where it's awkward because it's like when you have an A/B setting, so if like medium resistances, so Unreal uses UUs, which is Unreal units, represented as centimeters. So if I'm a meter from the target and I'm close range, but if I'm 1.01 meter from the target, I'm now medium range. It's like really, really punishing to not be like had to constantly be teetering that line, right? Or is it more like a gradient system where it's like every zero 0.1 millimeter is like 10% more away from light and towards medium, right? And to what Gog's saying is true, there is a level of copyright with certain verbiage. There's a lot of things, you know, like you can't just change the word crush to bludgeoning and pierce to stabbing. Like, you got to be careful with how you phrase things because of copyright, etc. Yeah, big oofs. Same way that I can't make post it. I can't make mail. We can't make stamps in game because and then sell them because the post office would sue me. It's illegal. What in tarnation, mechanic? Definitely can. Bludgeoning. Piercing. What's the opposite of slashing? Cutting. So cutting, stabbing, bludgeoning. Does it sound the same? Does it fit the right bill? Poking. Poking, bonking, and tweaking. Old Westified. There's a lot of examples that in game where we're working on like different terminologies that it's really fun to reference and pull the Western ones. So instead of being drunk, there's like a lot of terms for like you know, what it is to be drunk. So instead of saying you're drunk, you would say like you're three sheets to the wind, or like one of the terms for someone who's like a constant alcoholic was like a blue blotter, and just like these things have like these absolute deep cuts of references, you know, that than some things they use, or like, again, like we mentioned Tombstone earlier, right? It's like regarding consumption that people call like Doc Holliday's character a lunger because he has tuberculosis. He's coughing up blood in his lungs. So like having characters like that, those are like fun little NPCs to make also, where it's like we just tweak the VA work and tweak their like physical mannerisms, and it's like you got some guy with TB work walking around, and they'll call him like something not quite Doc Holliday. Call him like Mr. Vacation. Is that like the opposite of Doc Holliday? Not quite a doctor. MD Vacation. What's the opposite of a holiday? Ay, ay, ay. Keep the memes rolling. Yeah, it's a fun project. We have a lot of fun flavor coming out. So just to encapsulate the end of the stream, basically, I recommend checking out the Steam, checking our Discord when it comes to what's new, what's hot. We post things on Reddit, and we're going to be doing these sort of live streams more often. All right, so you'll get a good pulse for what's going on there. And then we also have Twitter, Instagram, whatever. But we're going to start to definitely ramp up our community engagement when it comes to live streams, Discord events, what have you. There's all the links that Brandon just posted. We'll for next time we'll get a bot that just has a command because it'll be way easier. But there's all of our stuff. So thanks guys for hanging out. If you have any further questions, just just ask them in the Discord, and we'll get around to them for sure. I absolutely enjoyed answering your questions, Bonky. All 40,000 of them. And, in 2 weeks, we'll do another one of these or whatever, and you'll have another million questions. And that's great. So thanks, guys. And I hope you had a good time and look forward to seeing you in the Dark West, in the Frontier. Howdy, partner. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll let you know when we have more stuff coming out. So from all of us to the Dark West, mwah, love you. Bye. Do I have a fade out button? I have a start button. This kind of works.